Select Board to order. There's a quorum present. And is there a motion regarding the agenda for the 6:30 meeting?
Yeah, I move we adopt the agenda for this meeting.
There a second? Second, thanks. From Mr. Wyman, any discussion? None heard. All in favor of adopting the agenda as it was posted, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. And the only thing on the topic tonight at 6:30 is the audit review. So I'll just turn the floor over, if I could, to Josh Quinn from RHR Smith and Company, the folks who did the external audit, and let him make his tour of the waterfront. And then I'm sure he's going to be available for questions for us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Pleasure to be here virtually. I actually have found, I've been doing a lot of these all year. And the virtual one benefit is I can actually lead you guys through the documents a little bit easier than everyone just sitting there flipping pages. So I think Bill's going to give me, Bill, have you given me the power to share? Oh, you have.
Did I? Guess I did. Sure.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and then we'll walk through the financial statements and the audit. Let's see if this works. No, Bill, you have not enabled.
Am I messing with you? No, I'm not. No, let me just make sure. Allow. It's interesting enough. Hold on a second, Dave. You gotta unmute you. Oh, okay, here we go. Can you actually log on as me too? Can you? I think somebody is the host. I can't see who the host is right now, but let me go back here. Let me get to you.
It's me, Bill. Why don't I just log out and you can take it over and I'll log back.
Yes, give me the power. Yes.
If I hit end, is it going to end everybody?
You should be able to just hit end. It'll give you an opportunity to assign somebody else. If not, well, I'll just jump back on.
All right, so while we're working on the technical difficulties, so we were on site. Well, this year was a combination of both remote and on-site auditing due to the pandemic. We were on site in the fall, visiting with Sue, Dave, and Jackie. And yeah, so I apologize for the delay this year. COVID has caused a bit of a struggle for everyone. The federal government ended up, as you know, issuing lots of money to lots of people, but didn't tell us how to do any of our work regarding that federal money till right around Christmas. So that was our Christmas present. So we've been sort of buried since then, working very hard to catch back up. So that's where we are right now. Okay, here we go. Let me see if I can give you the right screen. Okay. Everybody see my screen now?
Yep.
All right, excellent.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do, similar to last year and prior years, I'll just jump through what I consider the more pertinent schedules and statements. Talk a little bit about our process, and then please holler out questions anytime, or we can also do questions at the end. It's totally up to you. So as I said, we were on site in the fall, as well doing some remote work in the fall. Part of our process as we're doing your audit is we do a review of your internal controls, a review of your procedures, and then ensure that your procedures are being followed, and find any inconsistencies or variations. And as we go through those, we also note any types of recommendations we might have for some best practice updates to your procedures, stuff of that sort. And then those usual best practice recommendations are culminated in the management letter, which you also have, and we'll hit that right at the end of this also. So I'm going to jump right into Statement C. Oh, here we go. Statement C, this is your balance sheet for your governmental funds. It shows all of your major funds. The one everyone's typically interested in the most is your general fund. And we'll jump right down to we'll jump right down to the unassigned fund balance, which is what everybody typically wants to know. What was our fund balance at the end of June 30th, 2020. Your unassigned fund balance was $461,340. You had assets at the end of the year of $2,682,000, liabilities of 1.6, deferred revenues of 338,000. And then your fund balance total is 670,000, and that's made up of a number of different types of fund balances: non-spendable, restricted. So non-spendable, for example, is your prepaids. You'll see inside your assets right here, you've got prepaids of 35,116, and that falls down into your non-spendable. It's basically pulling that out of your total balance sheet, so you don't think you have that $35,000 to spend because you've actually already spent it. Okay, so moving on to Statement E. This is your statement of revenues and expenditures for the year. And I'll typically just will focus on the general fund, but obviously you have the transportation grant funds, trustees of public funds, and then other governmental funds. Other governmental funds are all of your non-major special revenue and capital project funds. And if you have any other permanent funds, there's a calculation that we do to determine what is major, what is not major. And then when we get to the back, you'll see that all these other governmental funds are broken out in other schedules. So you can actually see the same type of information that we're reviewing for your major funds in the back of the financial statements. So for your general fund, for your revenues, you had $7.351 million in revenues in FY20. Your total expenditures were $7,225,000. So you had an excess of revenues over expenditures of 126. Your other financing sources that are below the line, these are transfers in and transfers out of your general fund. And per GAAP, we have to show those below your normal revenues and expenditures. So those were a net deficit of $72,000, which most of which you guys budgeted for. And so you have a total change in fund balance of a positive $53,618. So you started the year off with $616,000 in your fund balance and ended the year with $670,000 in your fund balance. As far as fund balances go, one of the metrics we generally use when asked about where should we have our fund balance is a 30, 60, 90-day worth of expenses. And so I think I did this calculation earlier. Your 30 days of expenses are right at just under $600,000, which is about what you guys have in your fund balance, a little bit more. So you're probably at 34, 35 days worth of expenses in your fund balance. So you're right on the low end of that metric that we typically provide. So that's a good thing for sure. Moving on, why is it not working very well today? Moving on, your wastewater fund. So these are proprietary funds. This is your business type fund. So a little bit different here is that there is no fund balance. This is net position. So it includes all of your long-term assets, your long-term liabilities as well. So it's a little bit different metric at the bottom. Your assets in your wastewater fund, $5.394 million. Your total liabilities, $1.2 million. And then your net position is broken up into your net investment in capital assets. And what that is that's all of your capital assets less all of the debt that you still owe in those capital assets. So that gives you a net investment in capital assets of $3 million, just over. And then your restricted net position, restricted because it's in your wastewater fund and dedicated to your wastewater fund, is $1 million in there. Also, I would use a similar metric in a wastewater fund that I just gave you for the general fund, and your wastewater fund is in great shape because your wastewater operating expenses are only about $600,000. So you're well ahead in your wastewater fund. To jump right into the notes and all the way down to note 7. So the first note is a very long note. All these notes complement the financial statements that we just briefly went through. The first note is all about it's a lot of accounting language, for lack of a better term. And it talks about how things are valued, and it gives description of different types of fund balances, stuff of that sort. I'm going to skip right down to note 8, which is your long-term debt. Excuse me. So in your governmental activities, so this is your general fund, your capital, basically your general fund. You started the year with about $2 million in bonds payable, paid off 196,000, ended with 1.9. For your direct borrowings payable, this typically leases, stuff of that sort, for equipment, vehicles. You had started the year off with 421,000. You added $97,000 worth of notes payable, paid off 187 to end the year at 332. On the right side here, under the current portion, that's how much is due in FY21. And those payments are actually typically due in November, especially for your bonds, due in November. And then there's also an interest charge in the spring. For your business type activities, this is for your sewer department. You've got your bonds payable of 914,000, paid off 32, leaving you with $882,000 left. And in your notes, started with 83, added 206,000, and paid off 2,000 for a balance of 287. Just below this on the next page, it actually goes through every single piece of debt that you have still on the books. If you're interested to find out, okay, what makes up that $1.953 million of debt in the governmental fund, they're listed right here for you, so you can see the total value and then what your annual payments are as well. Same thing for all of your notes, your note payables, and then moving forward through your business type activities as well for your sewer funds. Schedule A, down to page 63. This is a snapshot of your budget to actual for all of your revenues for the year. Talks about your original and your final budget. You guys don't do any budget adjustments, which is not unusual. And gives you, this is a pretty 10,000 foot look at your revenues as far as from an actual perspective. So you had budgeted 7.2 million, actually received 7.385 million. And you can see where these variances are on the right side. Basically, state aid is one of the areas that you received extra revenue this year. Schedule B, this is the same thing, but this is your expenditures, and this is organized by department. It's a little bit more in depth, but you can also see your budget, original budget, any adjustments that you made, and then your final and your actual. So if you wanted to dive in to really get a feeling for how those numbers populated up above in that statement E that we looked at, this is where you could dive in to understand, okay, well, where were we over or under budget and how did we do over the year? All right, next is, oh, Bill, I've got someone, Stephanie Jerome, I'm gonna admit her. Oh, or maybe you did that. All right, Schedule E. So this is your special revenue funds. These are the non-major funds I had mentioned earlier. So this total here, when you add it to your capital project funds, which are just after this, will then add up back to that top page that we looked at in statement C. This lists all of your special revenue funds. This is the balance sheet, so it shows your assets, liabilities, and your total fund balance. And then below that is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and your changes in fund balance. So just like we looked at for your general fund, statement E and statement C. So it lists all your funds. You can see the activity that actually occurred in those funds in FY20. Schedule G is your capital project funds. This is your equipment and your infrastructure fund. It's the only capital project fund you have. And so this has your, what's the only non-major capital project fund you have. And this has your assets, liabilities, and fund balances, and then it has your revenues and expenses here. Okay. I'm going to move on to the management letter. I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can switch to that management letter. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned, we come through and we do our testing. So we pull lots of expenditures. We pull cash receipts, cash disbursements. We look at your payroll, and we test a myriad of things. And so one of the tests that we did this year for health insurance premiums came up with an issue there where the premium payments were calculated, I think, using a personnel policy, basically just an accident. A mistake, and instead of using some of the union agreements and contracts that you have. So that was addressed and immediately upon discovery. and talked to Jackie about how that occurred and updated the procedures to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. Bank reconciliations, the only comment here is just having someone sign off on those bank reconciliations that has some knowledge of the fiscal activities, and that could be because Sue does your bank reconciliations, so that could be Jackie, it could be David, it could be either of those folks, just for some complete oversight, just to make sure that nothing, not that we're suggesting anything ever would go wrong, but it's always good to have somebody else, another set of eyes looking at those bank reconciliations. So all in all, another good audit year for you guys. Definitely enjoy coming to the town of Brandon. It is one of the better municipalities that I audit from an organizational perspective, and just quite honestly, the ease with which information is provided and in the format it's given. So I definitely appreciate that. I'm happy to open up to any questions or comments, concerns.
Thank you for leading us through that, Mr. Quinn. And I appreciate that, this information can get kind of overwhelming to those of us who aren't involved with it on a daily basis. And, you highlighting what you highlighted, I think was really helpful. I appreciate that. I do think that they're super, they're super useful, those kinds of things where you can step back and look at the sum total of all the small decisions that we make on a week-to-week or month-to-month basis, and find out, what was the overall impact on the town's finances. And I know that the board tries to work with a long-term view, but we do get into the weeds a lot. So it's good to see those, those kind of aggregate figures. And thank you for the clarity that you presented them with. And I want to take the chance at the same time, if I could, to thank Dave and Sue and Jackie, and I know Elaine is involved with keeping the books in order, or keeping invoices and so forth in order, and appreciate all the work that the town staff does. Luann too, I think, has a hand in it downstairs, Sue, right? So thanks to all of you who are involved on a much more day-to-day basis and a much more granular basis than the select board is.
I want to apologize to Josh too, because when he came down the first time, we stuck him over in the town hall, and apparently the heat wasn't working, and he came over at noon and he said, "I'm really, really cold. Is there anything we can do?"
I forgot about that.
Yeah, you did forget about that. I remember that.
That's no problem. It was a strange time to be anywhere, quite honestly.
So I have a little bit of a question. This is only my second year of wading through town audits, and some of this stuff seems like it's written in a very boilerplate kind of way, and yet I'm I'm curious about on page 80. It talks about purpose of the report, and it says, in the statement, the purpose of the report is to describe the scope of our testing of internal control and compliance and results of that testing, and not to provide an opinion on the effectiveness of the entity's internal control or on compliance. So not to provide an opinion on compliance. And yet on the very next page, on 81, under the auditor's responsibility, it says our responsibility is to express an opinion on compliance. And I'm very confident that what you've done is great, but it strikes me as a contradiction that at one point you would say the purpose of the report is not to express an opinion on compliance, and yet on the next page it says it's your purpose to express opinion on compliance.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't completely disagree with you. I understand that it's confusing. So there's a couple things that we do. So there's the initial, let's see. So on this page 81, if you notice, this is the federal programs. So this is your federal compliance audit. And so we do actually two different audits. One is your federal compliance audit, and then the other is an audit of her financial statements. The audit of the financial statements is very much quantitative. So it's, we are providing an opinion on whether or not we believe the financial statements are fairly presented. And so an unmodified opinion, which is what you guys have, is the best it can be. And we're basically saying that, yes, we believe it's fairly stated in all material respects. The federal compliance has to do with, are you in compliance with those federal compliance requirements? And that's a little bit different. This page 81 is a little bit different than our independent report on internal control that you see here on page 79. This has to do with your financial statement audit, which is it's a small difference, but they are different. And so that's where the separation point is. So this document, page 79, this goes in all of our audits, regardless of if we're doing a federal compliance audit, because many of our clients, if they don't spend over that $750,000, don't have the federal compliance piece. And so that's where that ties into. And then we have the federal compliance.
Yeah.
What's that?
It felt very boilerplate, like it was what you put in all your reports.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And, a lot of that is because, well, quite honestly, there's so much that has to go into them. There's a boilerplate that's used. Absolutely.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Other questions or comments for Mr. Quinn from RHR Smith and Company, the auditors? If not, I think we can bring this meeting to its close, unless you have any final comments for us, or?
No, that was it. Thanks very much. I appreciate the working with the town of Brandon. I look forward to it every year, and we continue to look forward to it.
I wonder, thank you. I wonder if we ought to maybe have a little discussion about bank reconciliations and who in our town administration we might look to provide the dual control, basically. Sue, do you have any thoughts on that, or Dave? You two would be the
I would
most
suggest
involved.
Jackie. I pass them on to her and she could do a overview, I would think, but that would be up to Dave, really, but that would be my suggestion.
I thought that was already taken care of after Josh mentioned it to us that Jackie was doing it.
Oh, okay. So just by way of update then, that note in the management letter has already been addressed. Sounds like.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much. Anything else regarding the audit? Okay, if not, is there a motion to adjourn the first meeting of the select board, the 6:30 meeting? I think that was Tracy Wyman with a hand up. Is there a second?
Yep.
Second from Ms. Skiles, not debatable. All in favor of adjourning the select board 6:30 meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. I wonder, it's 6:54. I'll call the Brandon Board of Liquor Control Commissioners to order. Is there a motion on the agenda? Coolidge moves and Wyman seconds. Any changes to be made? None heard. All in favor of adopting the agenda as it was posted, say aye.
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 Appears to be unanimous. Is there a motion to take number 2 and number 3 as a consent agenda? Motion from Mr. Wyman, second from Mr. Coolidge. Anybody need anything removed from the consent agenda? If not, all in favor of taking item 2, approval of the minutes of March 22nd, and 3, ratifying the liquor licenses first class and third class for cattails, say aye.
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 That's unanimous. Item 4.
Motion to adjourn.
Coolidge moves to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Wyman seconds. Not debatable. All in favor of adjourning at 6:55, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Well done. Sue, thank you for taking care of this application for them. I know that you said there was a change, and I'd like to call the Brandon Select Board to order for April 12th. Is there a motion relative to the posted agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Coolidge moves to approve the agenda. Is there a second? Mr. Wyman seconds. Are there any changes to be made to the agenda as it was posted? None heard. All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. There are no opposed. Item 2, we have 3 minutes to approve. Can we take them together? Any objection to taking them together? Okay, so is there a motion regarding approval of the minutes of the noise ordinance hearing of March 20th, the noise ordinance hearing of March 22nd, and the select board minutes of March 22nd?
Make a motion to approve all 3.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Mr. Markowski. Any errors or omissions in the minutes of those 3 meetings as they were submitted? No errors, no omissions. All in favor of approval of those minutes then say aye.
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 Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. It's unanimous. Item 3, the town manager's report. Mr. Atherton.
Good evening, everyone. This is my report for the last 3 weeks, March 22nd, 29th, and April 5th. Segment 6 sidewalk repairs replacement will start next Monday, April 19th. We will also be going over punch list items in preparation for a final walkthrough. We've been awarded $300,000 for the V-Trans Transportation Alternatives Program to replace the sidewalks on Union Street from Hannaford's to the rail crossing. An invitation to bid has been sent out for construction of the bioswales in the parking area behind Cafe Provence and Pearl Street. If you remember, this was 100% grant funded by NRCS. I've had a few meetings with New England Woodcraft, NRCS, and Watershed Consulting to discuss and design a stormwater filtration system for the runoff on their property located on North Street. This property falls under the new 3-acre commercial stormwater regulations that are soon to be enacted. And we're actively going to be looking for grant options for Woodcraft and getting this project funded, which probably a majority of it will go through NRCS. Submitted all the required documents for the grant closeout on the electronic vehicles charging stations at the Conant Square parking area. Attended an emergency management hot topic meeting to discuss best management practices for roadsides and municipal right-of-ways. The majority of discussion focused on healthy tree canopy, diverse plant habitat, and safe roadways. And attended the Regional Transportation Council meeting on the 25th. There was a presentation by a Rutland High School student on the future of hydrogen vehicles and the new V-Trans ranking system for regional state highway projects. Rec news, Bill says he'll be offering an archery course led by Melinda Hart at Esterbrook Field or Park, sorry, on Fridays in May, ages 7 and up, $40 for 4 weeks. Check out brandonvt.myrec.com for more information. Miller Amusements, our carnival ride vendor, will be able to restart operations in Vermont after July 4th. Stay tuned for a new Brandon Carnival update. Signups for majors and minor softball will be ending on April 14th. T-ball and Mighty Mites will be open through the 28th of April. Sign up today. And we will forego a middle school lacrosse season due to not having a coach. And that is all I have this evening.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for the town manager from the select board? Tim.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what's the status of the swampland sale to the state. It seemed like that fell through, and I'm just kind of curious what the next step is. And kind of along that same line, I heard, or I understood from when I was originally looking at swampland as part of that process that I was on for a while, that there's a 95-acre piece that's unclaimed. And I'm just curious about your opinion of how that can ever come onto the tax rolls.
Someone would have to claim it. They'd have to quit claim it and hold it for 14 years unless someone else decided that they owned it. And so that's how that would happen. And yeah, the state backed out of the 2 swamp lot sales, but I have another party that's interested in it already. So I will be talking to them shortly.
Thanks.
Further questions for Dave from the board? How about from members of the public who are on the Zoom call tonight? Any questions for the town manager? This would be something perhaps covered in his report. Yes, was there a hand? No hand. Okay, we always have public comment on every item, and there is a dedicated public comment one coming up. Is there anything from the board in terms of items not on the agenda as we get to that, which is item number 4? Any board members with items not on the agenda? Okay, how about members of the public? We're on item number 4, which is public comment and participation. Any members of the public have anything they'd like to bring before the board that doesn't appear as a separate agenda item later in the meeting? Sure, Sue.
I just wanted to publicly thank Jimmy Pinkham because I caught him picking up litter before May 1st, which is Green Up Day, and he had a pickup truck full of litter that he picked up just around our neighborhood. So thank you.
Very good, and thank you for highlighting that. And in that vein, Helen Anderson has started her foot-based litter pickup on her walks, and she's done that for many years, and I appreciate her work too, and I'm sure that lots of folks do. Other public comment, things not on the agenda that you'd like to bring up? Doug Bailey.
Yes, I was wondering if we're going to get the 2 speed radar towers that we purchased with segment 6, one for either end of the town, if they're going to be put in soon.
Yep, they're due to be put in this spring. We got an early spring here, so ground's usually frozen. Guys will be putting them up shortly.
Great question, great response, thank you. Yes, Linda Stewart. Oh, Linda, we don't hear you. Can you press the mute, Linda?
Oh, yes, I get it.
There we go.
Now, I'm wondering if the sidewalks, particularly in front of the library and places like that, are going to be repaired. They're just shedding pieces from their from the concrete.
Linda, I just mentioned that in my town manager's report. Casella will be.
I didn't understand that. I'm sorry.
Casella will be back with the concrete supplier and the concrete company to either replace or repair the sidewalks as they're needed.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry I missed that.
Yep, starting next week.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any others? Is that a hand from Doug Bailey again? No. So this was not the last chance, right? There's public comment available on every agenda item. But we'll go ahead and do a little bit of business first. So item 5 is to consider the policy to avoid conflicts of interest in board appointments. This was introduced at a previous meeting. It was then discussed and edited a little bit and is now back to us in what I believe is the edited form. So what's the pleasure of the board on this policy?
I'll make a motion to approve the policy as it's printed.
Motion from Mr. Wyman. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Mr. Coolidge. Okay, to approve the policy as it was written and posted and included in the packet. Is there discussion on the policy? Any public comment on the policy before we bring it to a vote?
If you wanted to listen in on this in the extension, you would simply.
Oh, okay.
Brent Bueller. Great.
Noise ordinance, Ester book.
Yeah, good evening. What was the issue with number 3, having a second member from the same household? I'm not sure I ever understood that argument. I've been in design practice for 40 years, and we've had many married and cohabitating clients, and they don't always agree. We always said we had 3 clients, him, her, and them, and that we tell them we don't do marriage counseling. So I'm just not sure I understood what precipitated that element of this. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Brent. I think that the question about why is it here is valid, and I believe that it was expressed at a previous meeting by another board member in a way that I think was pretty succinct. And they said that, you know, the caution is that conversation does not stop after the meeting is over. And I think that that was a reasonable way to put it, that if there are two members of the same household, it's highly likely that there will be ongoing conversation outside of the meeting format.
Correct.
Couldn't that also be true, though, of just committee members that talk regularly or, you know, communicate on issues?
It could be, but I think it's highly more probable to happen if they happen to live together and dine together and so forth.
I might jump in just to say that one of the, I actually shared a similar concern, and the way I felt it was handled appropriately is because we have that point number 4, which is that at any time, if it seems like it makes the best sense for the town for us to appoint 2 people from the same household, we can waive this policy and appoint people as needed. And so I think that in exceptional cases, you know, we can make the best decision for the town.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
This was, you know, this whole policy is like the policy that it refers to at the top. These are sort of enhancements to the league's model policy, and the league's model policy on conflict of interest talks a lot about apparent conflict of interest. And that was where this would kind of fall into, would be an apparent, if not actual, conflict of interest that would tend to erode public confidence. Any more discussion, more public comment?
I'd like to say something about this.
Sure. Who's, it's Ally.
Yeah, this is Ally. Yeah, I feel like this was directed at Michael and I because it seemed to happen as we were both on the planning commission. And I just want to point out that we didn't talk about it at the dinner table because it feels like there's a lot of assumptions being made here, especially considering there's so much conflict of interest even with our select people. So I just want to point out that there's like a little bit of strangeness in this policy coming about right now when there's already so much conflict of interest in so many other things in town. So I just want to make that observation.
Thank you. Further comment? If not, are we ready to vote? All in favor of adoption of the policy as it was presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. That's unanimous, so the ayes have it. Item 6, noise ordinance discussion. Just by way of introduction, I do want to thank everybody who's made contributions to the discussion. It's been really informative for the board. The board heard from folks in public hearings on March 20th and 22nd, and the board has had a number of written comments submitted to it through the town manager and others. And we appreciate all those comments. I think that we've also had some good input from our police chief, and our town manager has gotten some a model policy and some further comment from the League of Cities and Towns. So I think we've been engaged in a great effort that's been really productive in terms of gauging what the community feels. And it's been helpful to have the range of opinions expressed that have been expressed. And I really appreciate everybody for what they have brought to the discussion and for caring enough to participate in the discussion. So thanks to everybody who contributed in any way to informing the board in that way. And so at this time, I think we probably are ready for the board to do some talking itself here in the public session about what its feelings are. So I'll just open it up. We don't have to have a motion before we have a vote on the rules for small boards. We can have discussion first. So I'll just open it up for the board to go ahead and chime in with their thoughts.
Yeah, I'll go start.
Thanks, Tracy.
I've read through all the letters. And out of, I think we had 22 letters, I believe. There were 12 people that were, we had 22 letters. One had no name, so I don't know who it was. So I've taken that one out. So out of the 21, I think we had 12 that were for, 9 that were against. We also received a letter and a thing from Peter and Carlene Warner. They did a survey over in the High Pond area. Out of that survey, there was 2 questions asked: if they were frightened when recreational shooting occurred, or if they thought we needed a noise ordinance. Out of the 35 people, nobody felt threatened when there was recreational shooting. Out of the 35 people on the noise ordinance, 34 didn't want a noise ordinance, and 1 said yes. My thought is, at this time, we have state statutes that reflect what we can do on this. And at this point in time, until we had more voter input, I mean, we've heard basically out of these letters, we've heard from 50 to 60 voters out of 1,100. I don't believe that's enough for me to warrant voting to have a noise ordinance.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Mike.
I've got to agree with Tracy on this one. I mean, we've been talking about majority rights versus personal rights, and I think the only fair way to see if we should even move forward on anything is, I hate to say it, but a whole nother town vote. I mean, you got to have the majority vote of the town in order for us to even consider something like this. And it's seeming more and more each day, each week, that there's a lot more people against this than for it. And we got to tread lightly on this whole thing anyways. Even if we do move forward with it, we got to have a way to enforce it. And that's a whole nother slice of pie in its own.
I would agree.
Thank you, Mike. Tim.
Yeah, I've been really, as Seth said, grateful for the broad breadth of points of view that have come through, and they've been very thoughtful. And I don't think this is just a gun issue. I don't think it's just a racing cars making noise issue. I think there's actually several kinds of noise issues that arise. I think it's fair to say that everybody agrees that you solve noise issues primarily by talking to your neighbor. And I think even if we had a noise ordinance, that would still be the dominant way that we solve noise problems, is that you would talk with your neighbor and come up with an agreement on what works for people. And I think that has always been true, and it will always be true in the future. I think the noise ordinance comes down to that small class of problem that cannot be solved with talking with your neighbor. I don't think this is the majority of noise, issues that arise. I think the vast majority will be solved with talk. But when you do need to solve a problem where talking doesn't work, it seems like a noise ordinance is a tool that's useful to have. And, I liken it to speed limits. We drive the speed limit just because it's safe and we know what's, the right thing to do. But when the police need to enforce someone who's going too fast, it's important for them to have a rule that says, you've exceeded the rule and now we have enforcement. I think of a noise ordinance as more like one tool in the toolbox for police or for our zoning administrator to use. I do understand we have state statutes. My understanding is that enforcing a state statute is slightly different than enforcing a local ordinance, and that the more we keep enforcement locally, the easier it is for us to enforce and actually be effective, and the less that it means trying to go into the court systems and do that kind of thing. And I think the last thing that I would put out there, just because we're trying to kind of put on the table some of what we've been thinking about, and I certainly have been thinking about this a lot, is, you know, when we had the animal control ordinance, it seemed like a lot of what we were trying to do was basically say at a local level what already exists at a state level. And I wonder if that isn't an analogous way to approach this, because there is a state statute about disturbing the peace. And so it already exists in state statute. We don't need to invent something to address that. But I think it may be appropriate to restate that in a simple noise ordinance sense, to allow us to apply it with discretion at our local level, which is, as I say, analogous to the animal control, where we basically just restated that we're going to allow our animal control officer to do exactly what the state already allows them to do by statute.
Thank you, Tim. Any further comment from the board? Any public comment? Yes, Karen Rhodes. Karen, do you want us to come back to you? I'm not understanding.
Her phone is muted. She called in and she used her video to do one set and her phone to do the other. And a while ago in the meeting, we heard her through her phone, and apparently she can't unmute her phone. Bill, is it possible to unmute her?
Now we can hear her.
Okay, I could not unmute my computer. Sorry. This happens all the time. Hold on. All right, can you hear me now?
You might want to try hanging up your phone, Karen. And since your computer does seem to be working, we can hear you over your computer.
Is that better? Okay. Okay. All right. I just don't understand why when neighbors dispute, okay, there's a mechanism for that. It's not kicking the whole kennel because one dog barks. Okay, you're gonna trying to gain enforcement through a neighborhood dispute is what this apparently blew up into. Seems a little odd to me, and it just seems that there's ways for neighbors to dispute this without involving the whole town and penalizing everyone and kicking everyone that might want to have a get together with their family or might want to not. I don't know. I just think it's a little excessive. If it's two people terrorizing each other, there's a mechanism for that, and it's not through a town ordinance.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Karen.
That's all I have to say.
And Linda Stewart.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jim. It's nice to be able to say, go to your neighbor and say, things aren't working out. But when your neighbor has teenage boys who bring out their instruments and play what they call as music, and I mean loud, and it goes on for a very long time, that is a question of, are you going to court the neighbor? And are you going to say, oh, you're my neighbor and I'm so happy you're my neighbor? But your two boys, they're just ruining life for people. I just think that there has to be some sort of restriction. Now, on the other hand, there's some people who live closer to this than I do. But anyway, they can go to the neighbor, that's true, or they can call the police, which means you got to bring the police in all the time on everything that's going wrong, rather than saying there's a restriction against that and letting people know that.
Thank you, Linda. Further public comment? Other contributions?
Yeah, I have something I'd like to say.
Please, Ally Breyer.
First, yeah, I'd love to get this thing on High Pond. Can we get that on the record, since Tracy is using that as evidence? Because I know personally multiple people who took that survey and said they were in favor of it. So it seems a little biased when the people who are doing this are, only said it was one person when we know it's multiple people. So I'm just really curious. So I'd love to get those results on the record so everybody could see them, as well as all of the letters that were sent in. That would be really important for all of us to be able to see. And I just want to mention that this is, I don't know why this is so difficult to understand when there's a neighbor that shoots assault weapons in the middle of the night, and why the idea that this person can be reasonable is really not truthful. And also, now that we've talked about a noise ordinance, we have people that come by our house, honk their horns, blow on their horns, squeal their tires, and do all these loud noises because they're mad. So I just want to say, like, the fact that we tried having conversations and that this is the response that we've been getting, and now people just shoot their guns. Our neighbors shoot their guns because they know because we're for a noise ordinance. So I just want to mention that, like, these are not reasonable people willing to have reasonable conversations with us, even though we've tried that. So I'm just at a point where we're at our wit's end and we don't know what else to do because we tried all the other avenues. And I know that so many people in town feel this exact same way, that they've tried having conversations, they've tried, and this is last resort. It's not just like calling all the time. It's like, we've tried everything else and now we need someone to step in. And I just really hope the select board thinks about all the people who have brought these issues up, because it's not like you're going to get hundreds of calls to the police department all the time. These are the severe issues where there's nothing else that can be done. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Can I chime in one more time?
Sure.
Oh, actually, I see May's hands up. I'll wait for May.
Amy Brown.
Thanks, Tim. I do want to echo my support for everything that Tim had to say. I think this is another tool that the town needs for the town to live in harmony, for the town's people to live in harmony. I come from the background of being a state police dispatcher for 14 years. I also dispatched for Brandon PD through Thomas's answering service for enough years. At times, you just need law enforcement to step in and take care of a situation. And there are enough of those instances in the town of Brandon that we need that extra tool. Chris Burkell and I have talked for years over barking dogs, that he could not help me because there was nothing in the ordinance that could help him with the barking dog. We listened to it for years before the Haggerty property was shut down. And it's not, you can't just say because there's guns being fired that we're not going to have an ordinance because I have a right to shoot my gun on my property. That's not the substance of this entire conversation. Too many people are taking the gun issue to heart with their Second Amendment rights and all this blah, 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 blah. Step back from all that and think about how you want to live in harmony with your neighbors. But when you cannot live in harmony with your neighbors and there's noise issues going on, you want to have tools to be able to resolve them peacefully. And I think we completely need to have this noise ordinance put in place to enhance Brandon as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi Brown. Tim, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah. I was just gonna also bring a little more information into the conversation. We're currently going through an enforcement action with our zoning administrator because in our Brandon land use ordinance, that's called the Blue O. It's what we commonly call the Blue O. It talks about having noise that has to be below 60 decibels at the property line at night and below 70 decibels at the property line during the day. And that's one of the items that's being enforced in this just this week with our enforcement action. And so I think that's another possible tool to consider when we start thinking about what's the right tool to try to address this issue. And the last thing I'll say while I have the floor is that I really don't I don't understand how a noise ordinance will impinge on the majority of the town when you say that having a noise ordinance will somehow be detrimental to most of the rest of the people, because if you aren't having a noise problem, then the noise ordinance will have no effect on you at all.
Does Dave Atherton have a hand up?
Tim, I just wanted to correct you on this, the Blue O having a noise ordinance. Whoops, I just raised my hand again. Sorry about that, guys. So that section, section 600, which are standards for new land use or development. And if you read, it's actually Article 6, performance objectives and standards. The first paragraph of that entire section says, no land use permit will be issued for any land use or development in the town unless the land use or development complies with the standards listed below. And then it goes to list those standards that need to be provided in order for our zoning administrator to issue a permit for any new land use or development. It's not a standalone noise ordinance. It's a criteria for new development and construction.
No, I do understand that, but as I'm looking at this notice of violation, it specifically makes reference to section 608 that talks about noise. And this is actually not new development. This is people that live there and that are.
And then it's not enforceable. I mean, it's not a noise ordinance. It's criteria for new development. It's just like Act 250. We actually had a similar conversation like this in the Planning Commission meeting last Monday night too. So
Okay.
Thanks. I understand where folks get that from, but they have to read the whole section. I did it with Chief Brickell a year or so ago, and we read it like 5 times. Like, no, right? And so it's not a noise ordinance.
Right. Okay.
Further comment? What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to suggest that we put like we did for the Animal Control Office ordinance, that we have a small study group that puts together a potential solution to this that we could then bring to the board and say, this is what we suggest going forward.
Is there other interest in that idea?
If you would accept a non-board member, I'd be willing to help with it with my Act 250 background.
Seth, I'd like to make a motion that we move along with what we've been going. If we're going to do anything on a noise ordinance, that we wouldn't do it till after next March. Do we have a town meeting to where we could hear from all our voters, not just 50 or 60? And so at this time, I'd just like to move that we would leave it as we are and leave it using the state statute.
Motion for Mr. Wyman is to maintain the current course, which is to rely on the existing state statute.
I'll second.
And a second from Mike Markowski. Was that the, was that everything you wanted to cover in the motion? Tracy?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to relook at it and relook at it for next year's town meeting to put it on the ballot, if you know, if there's a way that we can put it on there so that we can get the input from 1,100 people rather than 50 or 60, that'd be fine.
Okay. Is there discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in there. I agree that I think state statute may in fact be, you know, a potentially right tool for this problem. I would like to amend your motion to suggest that if in fact we pass your motion, that it includes a worded statement from the board about enforcement of the state statute. Because I think that the board needs to say how we expect our police and our community to get satisfaction from the state statute. And I think something specifically worded from the board is important.
So an amendment's offered to issue a specifically worded statement from the board regarding the enforcement of the state statute. Is there a second to the amendment? I don't hear one. And Tim, I think that it's not been the board's practice to really tell our professionals in any way how to do their jobs. We don't tell the wastewater plant chief operator how to, you know, maintain sanitation. And I don't think we've ever told the chief of police how to enforce Vermont law. He is the law enforcement officer, and his department are all trained law enforcement officers, and none of us are.
No, that's true. I'm not suggesting Chris doesn't do his job, and I see he's going to chime in, which I'm happy to have. I've had some productive conversations with him about this. I think the reason I suggested this is because it feels like there's a number of people in the community that would like to have clear understanding of how to address noise problems that they have. And I think that showing support for enforcing state statute is one way we can do that. But let's hear from Chris.
Please.
Yes, sorry to interrupt your discussion, and I don't mean to throw anything in there. I just was going to caution the board, if you were deciding on putting out a statement on behalf of the board about how we will enforce things, just keep in mind that we have standards that we have to meet. We have to meet probable cause. We have to meet a bunch of different things in order to charge somebody with a violation. And keep in mind, it's a criminal violation. So I would just caution the board, if you're going to have that discussion or come about together with a statement on how the board would like action by the police department, that your statement, if not worded correctly, might not meet the criteria that I have to meet in a court of law. That's all.
Right, that makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. So there's a motion on the floor from Mr. Wyman. I believe the amendment has failed for lack of a second. Is there more discussion on Mr. Wyman's motion, which was to basically keep things the way they are?
Seth,
Yes.
Question.
Was someone about to speak?
this is Lee Cars.
Lee Cars, great.
I do wonder though if the board wouldn't discuss further, and I know this is touchy with police enforcement, but I think there are people who want to know how they're going to move forward, especially if this motion is approved and they wait until next March to weigh in. How are these problems going to get resolved? What is the board's position on moving forward regarding the acrimony that's been created by this issue?
I would be very surprised if the board were foolish enough to take a public position on how these issues should be resolved.
Move the question, Seth.
There's been a call for the question. Is there a second to move the question?
I'll second that, Seth.
Second from Mr. Markowski. Those are not debatable. All in favor of calling the question and ending debate, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye. That's 4. Opposed?
Yeah, I oppose.
So I don't think we need to call the roll because I think it was clear. So that's Wyman, Coolidge, Markowski, Hopkins, aye, and Giles, nay. So the question's been called. Charlene, could we ask you to read Mr. Wyman's motion back to us before we vote on it?
Motion by Tracy Wyman, seconded by Mike Markowski, to maintain the current course and rely on the existing state statute.
Everybody in agreement with the wording of the motion? Is it as it was read? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and vote on the motion as it was just read to us. All in favor of the motion as read, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, so again, that will be Coolidge, Hopkins, Markowski, Wyman in favor, Giles opposed. So I think at this time, that does complete the noise ordinance discussion at this time in this iteration. I do want to thank, again, everybody who's here tonight and all those who have made contributions in various ways through the process, and encourage folks to stay engaged and to see if there is other input that is new that might be offered that could change things. And I think just by way of my final comment on it, I do want to thank, really have to thank Peter Werner and his group over there in High Pond. I think that the information that came to the board, which will go into the record, and Dave, can I ask you, we got this in paper form. Can you have this scanned and made part of the record of this meeting?
Absolutely. I'll send it to Charlene this evening.
Great. I found that to be a really admirable effort of outreach to a neighbor, to a community, to a neighborhood. And I found the fact that 35 people were willing to sign their names onto something was refreshing, and appreciated that really it was, to my mind, it was fairly dispositive in terms of what action the community does not support. So thank you for that.
I'd like to echo that too. Thank you for all the work, everybody.
And is there any other further comment after the vote now? Okay, great. So we'll go on to the next item if we could, which is the Esterbrook Park use policy. So we talked about this at the previous meeting. We had some information from select board meetings going back a number of years about when the present policy came to be. This came about as a result of a letter from Mary Lou Webster, who is a neighbor of the park. And then there was a response from Bill Moore, who is our Parks and Recreation Director and Economic Development Director, and his thoughts about use of the park. So I wonder, I think in the minutes that we approved, we had talked about whether we might hear from Mary Lou between the last meeting and this meeting. And I don't know, I see Mary Lou's on the call, so maybe I should just ask Mary Lou. Mary Lou, was there anything that you wanted to suggest the board take into consideration as we think about Esterbrook Park hours of operation?
I believe that the current hours have been working fine for years. The park should be closed at dusk, 7 a.m. to dusk.
And do
Town
you
manager
have
asked
any?
me about that years ago, and I told him that those were realistic hours.
And do you have any thoughts about perhaps some exemptions to that for certain special events?
No,
No. Okay.
the
Clear
park
enough.
was designed for outdoor recreational use, and that's generally been a daytime activity. I don't believe that the park should, the use should change to nighttime activity. That's a substantial change in use of the property. I don't want a lot of extraneous lighting over there and late hours of operation and noise that's disturbing to the neighborhood.
Okay, very good. So Mr. Moore's letter had asked us about rescinding the 1994 resolution, encouraging Mrs. Webster to reach out if she has any issues. We do have the resolution from 1994. I wonder, I did speak with Mr. Atherton about this a couple of times since the previous meeting, and I wonder if Dave had what I thought was a pretty great idea today. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about what you saw as a good comprehensive solution?
Sure. A few years back, we had talked, Bill and Chief Brickell and Seth and myself, about revisiting all of our kind of rules and bylaws we have for using any of our town parks and areas. And I think it's time for us to revisit all of those, especially with the way things have changed in the downtown area with, you know, we have some flourishing businesses. We do have quite a few green spaces now from FEMA property buyouts and everything, that I think it's time for us to revisit that and rewrite it to make it change with the times that we're in now.
So, so we've got parks that exist that don't have any kind of real guidance about them. Is that one?
Well, you know, we have you know, an open container rule, obviously, in the parks, but we seem to have been having, you know, special events where that happens more often than it used to. You know, when we do have some sort of regulation over the park with vendors, they have to fill out itinerant vendor permits with me, and we get license and information and stuff for them to make sure they're legitimate. But I think it would be good if we had something too, that if someone, say, wanted to use the bandstand in Central Park for an event or whatever, or even the town hall for that matter, they're all public areas and public places, and I think we should be a little more, I think everything should be covered all the same way, whether there's a roof on it or not. It's still a public area, public building, and you know, we've got some great areas that folks could use to do things in, and I think we should include Estabrook in that as well, so they're all under sort of the same umbrella of rules.
I think that all of these public places, you know, are valuable to the town, and that's actually what we have them for. And I do think that you brought a great idea to the board, and I wonder whether what's the pleasure of the board on it? Do you feel like the board itself wants to take a role in drafting comprehensive kind of use policy for our public spaces? Or do you want to ask the town manager and the rec director to come up with some recommendations and bring those to us? Or do you want to include the police chief? What's the pleasure of the board in terms of going ahead?
Seth, I'd like to entertain a motion to have the town manager and rec director to kind of put together a blanket policy for all of these green spaces to cover them all under one.
I would second that. And the only thing I'd like to do is I'd like to see them talk with Chris throughout it too. Didn't you say that, Dave, to have Chris involved?
Yeah, I mean, we started doing this a few years ago, and then we just, you know, things happened, and you know, we tore up the whole downtown. So we didn't have much time to talk about it. But I think it's, with everything that's happened, we should revisit this and come up with a good plan.
So the motion from Mr. Markowski, and was it a second from Mr. Wyman?
Yeah. So well, I'd like to make the amendment that Chris be involved with Dave and Bill.
Mike, would you take that as a friendly amendment without having to go through the amendment voting process?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so the motion then is made and seconded to ask the town manager and the Recreation Director and the Chief of Police to confer and come to the board with some recommendations for use of all the public spaces in town and how that might best serve the community. Is there discussion from the board or from the public? Sure, Linda.
Yes, I want to speak actually in support of what Mary Lou has said. And the reason is there are a lot of people who bought their homes and have lived in their homes for many years. For instance, Dot, the Websters, people like that who had a rule, they knew the rule, and now you talk about changing the rule. And not only that, there's a nursing home there, which is within a short distance, so that any noise at night is disruptive to the nursing home and to the apartments also there. So I think that, you know, you really need to consider that these people did not buy their home to have things changed. They bought it knowing that this was the rule, that this would be done at dusk. So as I say, I'm speaking in support of Mary Lou. I think that she has the right idea. Now, you know, we're very fond of the barn opera. I don't think the barn opera would continue doing anything in the park once they're able to open the barn. But, you know, we already have a carnival there. We have the fireworks there. We've already gone away from the rule that was there. And so I think we need to consider that these people are very disturbed by it, and all of those who live close by.
Thank you, Linda. Bill Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just in response to Linda and to Mary Lou, I have a great relationship with Ms. Wigmore. Her sons participate in some of the activities that we have there. I've received nary a complaint from anybody, including Ms. Webster, until this point, and to the point at which that letter was sent to the select board. We've had the carnival was something that was going on from 2017, maybe 2016. And we didn't do anything last year. The only thing that actually caused any sort of issue or maybe sparked this issue, as referenced in Ms. Webster's letter, was the barn opera, which we plan on doing again this August. And again, but like none of this was communicated. I mean, this is what we talked about. I guess we talked a little bit about the noise ordinance, is having open lines of communications. I'm always reachable. Something could have been done that night if the barn opera was that loud. The drive-in movie theater, which happens after dark, all that's broadcast over people's car radios. There's no extraneous noise at the borders of the property. Again, the neighbors that directly border the park, closest to the drive-in, have no problem. They have young children that come over and participate in all the programming we have there. I guess I fail to see why this has become such a big issue when it's the complaints of one single resident that's causing us to rethink the entire way that we use this park. We have hundreds of families that use that park, and occasionally those activities go to after dark. Are we going to be kicking kids out at the end of the night when we're doing our Halloween trunk or treat thing? Are we going to have the police down there kicking the kids off the field because it's at dark and the dusk? That seems ridiculous, especially for a public park, especially for something that serves our public so well. And again, like I said, if there are neighbor problems, if there are issues with noise, that's something that can be dealt with. Things can be turned down. This isn't binary. This is something that can be changed and can be worked. I just don't see where this is as large of an issue as it's being made right now. And we've never had fireworks down there, Linda. We've had fireworks as a part of the fireworks, but again, that's something that would happen after dark. We wouldn't be able to do. The fireworks have been moved to downtown.
I would like to respond.
Sure, Mary Lou Webster.
I did call in my complaints, but I called them into the police department. And when I called in a complaint in the afternoon about the barn opera, when they were setting up, I called in the afternoon, not during the evening performance, when they were adjusting their PA system. And I talked to the police dispatch. I asked to have a call put through to Brandon Police to tell them to please turn it down. It was too loud, to turn it down by half, that across the street, with windows and doors shut, It was still too loud, and they refused to put the call through.
And I have to say to you, Ms. Webster, that if you had reached out to me, that would have happened. That could have been resolved that day.
I reached out to my elected officials. That's why my select board got a letter about this, because those people are directly accountable to me as a taxpayer and a voter. And those are the people I contacted.
I
I
respect.
talked to you once before about another matter down in Brookfield that you didn't take care of. I'm sure you don't want me to go into the details of that tonight at this meeting, but after that, I gave up on you.
I would be interested to actually have you go into those details, and if you feel it's that severe of a, please do.
Right now?
I mean, if that is your pleasure. I mean, I don't want to, Mr.
Not really.
Mr. Chair. Okay. But again, like, I am responsive. I've been responsive to many people in the public, and had you called me that day with Barn Opera, the noise would have been settled.
I called the police, and that should have taken care of it, and it didn't. So I feel we need a noise ordinance that's got a little more meat to it and more enforcement potential.
Chief Burkell, thank you.
Sorry, I just want to clarify for the record, this is the first that I'm hearing of Ms. Webster's complaint, and the fact that she called dispatch, who is state police for our dispatching, and wasn't put through is something not only that was out of my control, but I was not aware of. So that's, while I agree that she should be able to pick up the phone and ask for our services if there's something that needs to be addressed, I can't address something that I didn't know was even addressed. Yes. So just wanted to clarify that point.
Bill had asked us about the drive-in, and I have to ask Bill, I guess, when is the schedule for that, Bill? Like, what is the plan?
So the plan is to do a schedule from June through the end of July, with some breaks obviously in between, because we won't be doing every weekend, but there will be June through July on Fridays and Saturdays. And again, we talk about extraneous noise. There's little to none because people are listening to this inside of their car.
To go forward with your plan, or, as it would impact your plan, do you need the board to do something tonight, or
Yes,
can the board wait?
I mean, I guess you could wait a meeting, but I mean, I would strongly consider or we will have to cancel the drive-in, and we'll have to cancel some of our other events, including Spooksville. Based on the resolution whose enforceability was questioned at the time of when it was enacted.
Our town manager, Dave Atherton, has his hand up.
So I guess a couple of things that I'm a little concerned about here. And when we, at the last select board meeting, the decision was made that Ms. Webster and Bill Moore and myself would meet, and she would get a hold of us and we would discuss this, which did not happen. We did not get a call from Mary Lou. The other thing I remember too, I think when I read the old Esterbrook policy or ordinance to you at the last meeting, that the reason that it was closed at dusk is due because there were no lights down there. There were no lights in the parking area. There are no lights anywhere. There are lights down there now. And when we've had events, we've been able to get lights donated to us to do events. And maybe I'm reading that policy wrong, but to me, it looks like the only reason that things weren't happening down there after dusk was because there wasn't enough lighting. And now there is.
I will reply to the first part of your statement. And the reason I did not meet with you is because I sent my concerns to my elected officials. that this is a public issue that should be discussed in a public forum and not settled behind closed doors. And that's why I did not come to see you. This is the appropriate place to discuss these issues in public where the public can hear, because it doesn't just involve me. It involves other neighborhoods in the town.
Okay, so Mary Lou has asked for some public discussion and action in a public setting by her elected officials. Totally fair request. Mr. Moore has asked for the board to rescind the 1994 Esterbrook Park hours of operation policy so that he can proceed with his plans for the summer. I think that to be responsive to both of those things, to Mary Lou's comment and to Bill's comment, we can discuss it here. I think that's fine. We've taken a vote. Have we not? Have we had a motion, or have we taken a vote to ask Dave and the chief to do their thing? We haven't taken
a vote.
We haven't taken the vote yet. Well, should we proceed to that vote and then we can have some more discussion about Esterbrook Park in specific? Let's go ahead and proceed to the vote, which was to ask town manager, recreation director, and the chief of police to confer and bring to the board recommendations for the use of public spaces, or something to that effect. Right, Charlene? Is that about where we are? Yeah, okay. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe that was unanimous. That's great. We don't need a roll call. And then specific to Esterbrook Park, as I said, Mary Lou has asked us to discuss it in public and not delegate this out to the professional staff. We can do that if you want, or we can not. And then Bill has asked also for some action tonight so that he can make plans or not make plans for the summer, because he needs to know in advance what he should be planning or should not be planning. So the formal request that came from Bill was to rescind the motion that was adopted on September 26, 1994, which said year-round hours of operation for Esterbrook Field facilities shall be from 7 a.m. to dusk. Is there any action on the board's part related to that?
I'd make a motion to rescind it.
Motion for Mr. Wyman to rescind. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second for Mr. Markowski. Is there discussion?
Yeah, I guess my only suggestion is that it seems like Dave and Bill and Chris are going to put forward a suggestion for how the park should be run that would include that. And so I'm just wondering if this is getting the cart in front of the horse.
Well, it's absolutely true that that's going to happen. But the reason that I'm raising it after that vote is that, I said the reasons why I was raising it. We've had a request both from Mary Lou to do this in public and not to have it entirely delegated. And we've had a request from the rec director to take action tonight so that he can know what he's got to plan for, 6 weeks from now.
Right.
I'm not in disagreement that, this is a very specific thing, and we've just tasked them with doing a more general policy, which I think is the more sensible way to do it. It's a comprehensive policy that's been thought out by professional people and brought to the board as a recommendation, I think is the smart way to go. And I'm glad that the board has endorsed that path forward. And now I'm just trying to be responsive to two people who are here in the meeting who've asked for specific action about a specific place. Brent Bueller has a hand up.
Yes, I've tried to follow the whole conversation, and I think I recalled at some point that the deed or the legal papers that went with this property, do they allow for commercial activity?
I have
Such
no
as-
knowledge,
such
I have
as the
no
movie
knowledge of the deeds or any restrictions on them. Does anyone in the meeting have any knowledge of the deed that was conveyed to the town when the town received Esterbrook Park? I think the town manager might have just stepped away and come back with a file, perhaps on that matter.
Thanks.
So the resolution has nothing to do with the deed. It actually says resolution changing the hours for Estabrook Field. Originally, Estabrook Field was posted to close at 10. Then it says, which is well after dark during all seasons. And it says, whereas although there are plans to install security lights at the park in the near future, there are no lights nor plans to install lights for athletic events or other park activities. And there are no authorized park activities that can take place after dark. So they resolved that year-round hours would be 7 a.m. to dusk, and it would start effective September 26, 1994. The vote was 3-2. And that's all that there is on that.
So to your knowledge, Dave, there's no deed restriction?
Not by this resolution, and it looks like prior to this resolution, that events could go till 10 p.m.
It does appear that way, that yes, they were limiting the hours by changing the closing time from 10 p.m. to dusk.
Which honestly, if the board has decided to use state statute for noises in the nighttime, then 10 p.m. would be a valid time because that's what state statute says.
I see a hand from Jessica Joes.
Hi, yeah. I wanted to just speak in general about the rec department, and I think what's important is that families in Brandon have good things to do as families, and the Estabrook Park is a good spot for the types of activities that have been going on. And I believe that that having a lot of things to do for young families strengthens a community in a very, very important way. And we shouldn't take that lightly. We shouldn't restrict that so much that that we impede that is so important for families and for the community in general, and also for Brandon as a destination for events, which only helps our businesses, it helps our town, and it helps our community spirit. So I think it's important to let Estabrook be a space like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comment from the board or the public or input? Okay, so there's a motion to rescind the 1994 policy, right? Resolution. If there's nothing else to be said, are we ready to vote? All in favor of rescinding the September 26, 1994 policy changing the hours of operation for Estabrook Field, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Was that unanimous? The screen has moved around, I'm sorry. Was that unanimous?
Yes, it was.
Unanimous, okay, thank you. So that's been rescinded. And I think we will wait. I don't know, Dave, is the next meeting too early to ask you, or should we ask for maybe a month or something?
Well, why don't we start and see where we're at?
Okay. If it's not done, you can tell us you're working on it. That would be good.
So,
any other comment on that after the vote? Okay, item 8, there's a real estate conveyance, and I'll ask Mr. Atherton to introduce, please.
So this is the offer that I brought before you folks a while back now with the gentleman who originally wanted to get an easement, and the board would rather have sold it. So this is the purchase and sale contract that our attorney has drafted up for your folks to consider approving, and the 1061 notice that we have to post in the paper is attached.
What's the pleasure of the board on the resolution or on the purchase and sale contract for the real estate conveyance?
I make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Motion from Tracy and the second from Brian. Is there any discussion on this?
I have a question. Does this cover the legal costs of selling the property and the advertising costs?
Yep.
Great.
Further discussion? This has been discussed at previous meetings, and I appreciate that. Further discussion tonight? Yes, Brent Bueller has a hand up.
Yeah, to Tim's question, when I reviewed the purchase and sale contract, it didn't have any of that, the town's costs being covered in this. So am I missing something? It had everything else, but it didn't have that.
I can send you all the emails between attorneys, the purchaser, and myself with the associated fees and what the cost is going to be at the closing. I believe it was $450 were attorney's fees. He was a little worried they'd be too much and he might not be able to purchase it. So we talked over and came up with that price. So.
Okay, because I thought this said this constitutes the whole agreement. So that's why I asked and to Tim's question. So thank you, Dave.
Sure.
Thank you, Brent, and thank you, Dave. Other questions or comments? If not, ready to vote, all in favor of the purchase and sale contract, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. That is unanimous. Item 9, there's no paperwork on this, right? So consider reinstating interest and penalty on sewer and taxes. This came to us, I guess, from either the town manager or the town treasurer. I don't know who, but whoever wants to talk to the board can talk to the board.
So I can certainly talk about this. We, at the end of last year, we weren't all that far off with our delinquencies as we usually are. You know, it was pretty much the same numbers, the same names. With all of the financial assistance that's come out to folks with not really real estate taxes, but with water, sewer, and everything else. You know, there's been ample opportunity and ways for folks to pay this, and some at no cost to them. And again, we're not seeing any unusual, and Sue can back me up on this. We were only like, I think, $10,000 more in delinquent taxes last year than we were the year before at the end of the fiscal year. That it really wasn't enough of an alarm for me to, anyway, as a delinquent tax collector, to feel that there was worry that we were putting, you know, the majority of the town in a bad position here. So, and you know, there's a lot of work involved with us in this office with setting up payment plans and, you know, doing what we have to do with meetings, and then actually doing a tax sale and everything else. So, you know, the board waived it for a year, and I think the financial situation with folks has gotten, you know, back to normal, and I think it's time to go back to normal for us too.
Thank you, Dave. Thoughts from the board? My only thought is I wonder whether we did waive it for a year or we waived it for the duration of the state of emergency. And I feel like when we did COVID stuff, I thought we did things like, you know, Zoom meetings for the duration of the state of emergency. And I thought we probably did waiving of penalties and interest for the same.
Is there a timing issue, Dave, for when this is comes back into force, or can it be any month that we decide to start it?
Well, that's up to Sue and Luann, because they're the ones pushing the buttons. So, but I've got the list here. I think January 4th, we're supposed to be open back up and full again. So, which would be 3 days after the start, or 4 days after the start of our fiscal year.
Did you say January 4th or July 4th?
July 4th, I'm sorry. I have a list here somewhere that the state sent out that showed what it was.
Yeah, it's July 4th.
July 4th, yeah.
They were hoping for the weekend of July 4th.
Yeah, I like the idea of maybe starting it July 4th.
Well, it would, yeah, I mean, July 1st would be, you know, the start of the fiscal, but nothing would be delinquent until the first payment anyway, so, or until we do interest on the system. which we do after that. So,
And I agree with Seth. I think we did it for the state of till the state of emergency was taken off. So we'd be good at July 4th, right?
Butch is shaking his head no.
No.
Butch,
Thanks, Seth. The governor is shooting for July 4th. He hedged his bet, so to speak, that depending on how everybody does and depending on the vaccination roll-up, and if things go well, it will be that weekend. But he has not yet talked about rescinding the emergency order, because much of the legislation that was passed last year is dependent on the emergency orders to stay in place. So right now, I think our legislative council is looking at those emergency orders to try to see how it affects all the legislation that we passed last year. So it's if you're going to tie this to the emergency order, that could be a problematic for you, or if you just want to pick a date, and that's up to you folks. And there's no certainty on the governor lifting the emergency order at any time.
I got another question, Dave. I'm curious about, the purpose for interest and penalties is to compliance. And I guess I'm curious if interest and penalties are going to make a difference on people paying their sewer and taxes.
Well, if you saw the penalty, it's pretty hefty. So, and I think we are losing every sort of enforcement action or whatever we're having to collect taxes. So it's very hard when I'm going through, we talked about it in March that, I needed to start going forward with this so we don't get behind again and see, the town up to upwards of, the amounts it was 6 years ago. So yeah, I think we're losing our ability to do some collection, and I really don't see where we're seeing anything out of the ordinary enough where, we'd be worried that the whole town's going into delinquency.
So I'm just looking at the town report book, and on page 13, we had a new feature this year, which was the highlights of the select board meetings. And it says on September 14th, for COVID, we waived interest and penalties on property taxes during the declared state of emergency. And we did the same on sewer bills with the same phrase. So I guess I'm wondering if we could just let it ride until the state of emergency lifts.
Since it's on that record, are we even allowed to change that wording at this point? I guess be a question.
Well, I suppose we could, because I mean, we just rescinded a motion of a board from 1994. I'm sure we could rescind a motion of the board from September if we were inclined.
I support the idea of waiting till the end of the state of emergency.
I kind of like that. Other thoughts?
So do you guys want me to hold off on any sort of tax sale for another year then?
I would, yeah. I think that, I think I'm right that, there's a moratorium still on evictions, and isn't there?
Towns are doing tax sales though.
What's that?
Towns are doing tax sales.
Towns are doing tax sales. I don't think I would want Brandon to be doing a tax sale during a declared state of emergency. I'm not the only guy. Other thoughts? Collaborative leadership here.
Oh, I think we'd better just leave well enough alone at this point.
I personally think we should start trying to reinstate that, but yeah, I'm kind of with Dave here. I mean, I don't want to get too far behind and then have to play catch up for a lot of people. I guess is the way I'm seeing it now and getting explained to it.
Yep.
So I know, like, I'm sure there's people there that think I'm sending evil because I want to move forward with this. But it's been really successful with folks in getting payment plans and sort of helping them to get, back to somewhat normal. And I feel like we have no ability to do that right now, especially if we don't have interest and penalty and things. And it's up to you guys. I understand that that's what was said, and I thought it was for the year, but obviously it was for the state of emergency. So
I think what the goal was at the time was to not choose an arbitrary date, but to basically kick the decision upstairs, so to speak. I think we were feeling like, the governor and his staff were likely to have the best information possible. And, he is the highest elected official in the state. And I think that we were hoping that we would be kind of working in concert with his emergency order and in support of it, and not necessarily going on our own in this way. At least that was kind of my mindset with it.
Great.
I'd like to add, once the state of emergency is lifted, I can see a lot of these programs and a lot of the monies being not as available to people that are behind. And it's not going to be as easy for them to catch up as it would be now.
You could still go on with the tax sale, couldn't you, Dave?
Well, you guys sort of suggested for me not to, so.
I mean,
yeah, it doesn't matter. Whatever you guys want to do on this.
Further thoughts? Anybody want to make any motion of any kind in any direction? I suppose if we don't have a motion, then the existing policy of the town is to wait until the state of emergency expires before we start charging interest and penalty.
Could we bring that up could we bring this up at the next meeting? Discuss it more?
Absolutely. Dave, can you want to put it on next month's agenda or next meeting agenda? Is that fine for now? Any other thoughts? Public comment? Okay, so we'll think about that a little bit longer. Minds can be changed, policies can be changed, absolutely. Item 10, consider the loan resolution for the wastewater bond.
I move that we accept the loan resolution for the wastewater bond.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second that.
And there's a second. Any discussion on this?
That's great news.
Yeah, Dave, can you want to highlight the news part of it for the record?
What highlight would you like? That we got approval to borrow money for our wastewater upgrades? I actually have some other news about it today. It's kind of exciting.
Go ahead.
I was going to save it for the next meeting, but it'd be good. So it has to do with this. So today I got word from USDA that they want to, it's rural development. They want to take our project as like their Earth Day project because of clean water and everything. So we might see some of our smiling faces on the news. So that's kind of cool. Little Brandon's wastewater plant that's 50+ years old is going to make some headlines. So for something good, and we hopefully won't get fined out of it.
That is good news. Very good.
But yeah, this is just a resolution for the money that we're getting through USDA to get the project done.
Okay, so we have the motion in the second. We've had a little discussion. Anything further? All in favor of the resolution for the loan for the wastewater bond, go ahead and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That's a vote. How about the warrants that came?
Make a motion to approve the April 12th warrant of $156,644.49.
I'll second that.
Motion for Mr. Wyman and a second for Mr. Markowski. Are there any questions on the bills Okay, all in favor of approval of the warrant, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. It's unanimous. Okay, last bit is announcements, suggestions, further comment before the board goes for an executive session about union contracts. Anybody with anything they want to share with the board, share with the community, put in the minutes, things of that nature? I'm not seeing any hands. But yes, Mimi.
I hope you don't think this is petty, but I was wondering if Brian Coolidge could turn on a light so we know if he's awake or asleep or even in the room.
I would, but it flashes. It's not working well.
Oh, okay. Well, at least I now know you're there.
What about that?
Brian and Bill and Dave are all in different rooms at the town office is how this has been going.
Well, it's just nice to see people's body language when you're having conversations, and when you're in the dark, we don't know what they're doing or if they're even paying attention.
Point well received. Anyone
Zoom
else?
is horrible for people with OCD, just to let you know.
Am I light enough for you, Mimi?
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
And you're paying attention.
Anyone else? Okay, if not, I do want to thank you all for being here. It was pretty productive and appreciate all the contributions.